Hello, General Hospital will reveal when Nina finally decided to confess her brief affair with Drew. She couldn't have anticipated the reaction it would provoke from Willow. Their relationship had already been strained for some time, with tension building up between them. But what Nina was about to reveal would send their bond spiraling into an unexpected and difficult turning point. Nina, hoping that her confession would alleviate some of the tension between them and perhaps even mend their fractured relationship, had no idea that she was about to face a completely opposite response from her daughter. As Nina divulged the details of her affair with Drew, Willow could not contain her emotions. The words coming from her mother were not only shocking, but also stirred up a deep sense of doubt and disbelief within her. Willow had always trusted Drew, and the idea that the man she was beginning to fall deeper in love with, was involved with her mother in such a way felt like a betrayal she couldn't comprehend. She had always viewed Drew as a kind, honorable man, someone she had hoped could be a part of her future. But now, the man she cared for was entangled in a situation that seemed beyond her understanding. Willow's mind raced as she tried to piece together the information, but it was too much for her to absorb all at once. She couldn't fathom how her mother, Nina, could have had an affair with Drew, someone she had begun to trust and form a deeper connection with. The very thought of it made her feel sick to her stomach, as if her entire world had just been turned upside down. Her love for Drew and her loyalty to him clashed violently with her sense of betrayal from Nina. What added to the complexity of Willow's emotional turmoil was the fact that she had been trying to build a closer relationship with Nina. She had wanted to trust her mother and hoped that they could grow closer after everything they had been through. But now, this revelation shattered that fragile progress, leaving Willow feeling lost and betrayed. How could Nina have kept something like this from her? How could she have been involved with Drew in such a personal way? Knowing how close Willow was becoming to him, the more Willow processed Nina's confession, the more she felt a profound sense of anger and disbelief. She couldn't bring herself to accept what Nina was saying as the truth. In an instinctual response, Willow rejected the idea outright. Her mind refused to accept the possibility that Drew could have been involved with Nina in this way. "I don't believe you," Willow blurted out, her voice trembling with a mixture of shock and rage. The words came out before she even had time to fully grasp the gravity of the situation. It was the only defense mechanism her heart could muster against the painful reality Nina had just laid before her. Willow's disbelief wasn't just about the affair itself, it was about the betrayal she felt from both Drew and her mother. The man she was starting to trust and care for had been involved with her mother behind her back. The layers of deception seemed too much for her to bear. And her mother, the woman who had raised her, now seemed like someone she could no longer trust. In that moment, Willow felt completely alone, caught between her love for Drew and her confusion and anger toward Nina. Nina, on the other hand, could feel the emotional distance between them widening in an instant. She had hoped that by confessing, she might be able to clear the air and potentially repair their fractured relationship. But instead, all she had done was push her daughter further away. The look in Willow's eyes, the disbelief, the hurt, the anger, cut through Nina like a knife. She had expected shock, yes, but not this level of rejection. Nina had believed that by confessing her mistakes, she might regain some of Willow's trust. But in that moment, it felt as though she had lost her daughter all over again. Willow's reaction was a harsh reminder of how fragile trust can be and how deeply betrayal can wound someone's sense of self. The confession that was meant to bring them closer now seemed to drive a permanent wedge between them. As the silence stretched between them, both women were left to grapple with the fallout, Willow struggling to reconcile her feelings for Drew with the reality of what Nina had said, and Nina facing the heartbreaking realization that her attempt to be honest had only made everything worse. However, Willow's response was not limited to shock and surprise. Instead, she chose to completely deny the truth that Nina had just confessed. The overwhelming feeling of betrayal and the inability to accept what her mother was saying led Willow to respond coldly. Her voice filled with emotion as she declared, "I don't believe you." The words came out harshly, laced with deep anger and disappointment. In that moment, Willow's feelings of betrayal overwhelmed any sense of reason, and she couldn't fathom that the man she was beginning to love could be involved with her mother in such a way. For Willow, the idea of Drew being part of Nina's past, even if it was brief, felt like an unbearable lie. Drew, the man who had started to win her heart, was now implicated in a situation that contradicted everything she believed about him. To her, it was unthinkable that he could have been with Nina, someone she had grown to trust as a mother figure, especially after all they had been through together. Willow couldn't shake the feeling that Nina was fabricating this story, perhaps trying to destroy Drew in her eyes. It seemed like a desperate attempt to undermine the man Willow cared for, and the anger she felt toward Nina grew stronger with each passing second. As the words left Willow's lips, Nina could see the hurt in her daughter's eyes. The sharpness of Willow's response cut through the air, and Nina felt a pang of guilt and sorrow. She had hoped that by confessing, she would be able to clear the air, but now it seemed as though she had only deepened the rift between them. For Willow, this confession wasn't a moment of clarity or understanding, it was a devastating betrayal. To accuse her mother of lying about Drew was to accuse her of the ultimate deceit, and it was something Willow couldn't bear to accept. In that tense moment, Willow's mind was in turmoil. She didn't want to believe that Drew could be the man Nina described, but the possibility of it shattered the trust she had in him. Yet, the thought that her mother, Nina, would stoop to such a level to hurt her left Willow feeling more betrayed than ever. The internal conflict between her love for Drew and the anger toward Nina was too much to handle, and she retreated into her defense mechanism, denial. Willow's refusal to believe Nina wasn't just a rejection of her mother's words, but also a desperate attempt to protect herself from the devastating realization that the man she loved could have hurt her in such a way. She couldn't let herself accept the truth. At least not in that moment. The overwhelming emotions of anger, confusion, and disappointment clouded her judgment, leaving her unable to face the painful reality that was unfolding before her. As the silence hung in the air between them, both women were trapped in their own emotions. Willow, holding on to her love for Drew and her need for stability, couldn't bring herself to accept what Nina had shared. Nina, on the other hand, felt the weight of her daughter's rejection, knowing that her attempt to be honest had only pushed Willow further away. The rift between them grew deeper, and neither could predict how they would ever find a way back to each other. The tension between Nina and Willow worsened as Nina failed to convince her daughter to believe what she was saying. Willow not only refused to accept the truth, but also began to suspect that Nina was intentionally lying in order to harm Drew. This accusation hit Nina hard, intensifying her feelings of desperation and disappointment. She had hoped that by being honest, she could clear the air and repair their strained relationship, but instead, she found herself facing a wall of mistrust and anger. For Nina, it was a bitter pill to swallow. She had never intended to hurt Willow, but now, the daughter she had tried so hard to rebuild a relationship with was accusing her of deceit. Willow's fierce loyalty to Drew clouded her ability to see the situation objectively, and that only deepened Nina's sense of betrayal. The more Willow clung to her belief that Nina was lying, the more Nina felt isolated and misunderstood. She couldn't understand how someone she loved so much could choose to believe the worst of her. It was as though the very foundation of their relationship had been shaken, and no matter how hard Nina tried, she couldn't reach her daughter. The painful realization hit Nina that Willow's love and loyalty to Drew had made it nearly impossible for her to accept the truth, no matter how much Nina tried to explain. Willow's intense feelings for Drew were blinding her to the reality of what had happened, and Nina found herself powerless in the face of her daughter's emotional attachment. Nina had hoped that by coming clean, she could restore some level of trust between them, but instead, she had only made things worse. As Willow's accusations continued, Nina's frustration grew. She had opened herself up to Willow in a way that she thought might bring them closer, but now she was left feeling like the enemy. The more Nina tried to explain herself, the more Willow shut her out, and the deeper the divide between them became. It was a painful reminder for Nina that love and loyalty could be both a strength and a weakness, especially when it came to her relationship with Willow. It seemed that no matter how much she tried to be honest, the truth was something Willow wasn't ready to face. In the midst of this turmoil, Nina realized that, for the first time, she wasn't just fighting to repair her relationship with Willow, she was fighting against Willow's unwavering belief in Drew and the emotional bond they shared. This made it even harder for Nina to reach her, as she could see that Drew had become an obstacle she couldn't easily overcome. The situation had become a bitter struggle, one in which Nina felt helpless and defeated, unable to break through the walls Willow had built around herself to protect the man she loved. Although Willow's initial response was to completely deny Nina's story, the truth could not remain hidden forever. As Ned, Tracy, and others, including Cody Bell, began to support Nina's account, Willow found herself increasingly confused and unsettled. She had always relied on her own understanding of Drew, and now, with more people backing Nina's version of events, the walls she had built around her beliefs began to crumble. Slowly, a harsh reality started to settle in. Maybe, just maybe, her mother wasn't lying. It was Drew, the man she had begun to trust and fall for, who was the one not being honest. However, this realization did not come easily for Willow. It wasn't something she could simply accept in a moment of clarity. The betrayal she felt was overwhelming. The idea that Drew, someone she had begun to build her life around, could be part of a lie was not just a minor shock. It felt like her whole world had shifted beneath her feet. She had trusted Drew, and now she felt deceived by both him and Nina in different, devastating ways. It was a betrayal that reached deep into her heart, making it hard for her to even contemplate the truth without feeling her trust unraveling in every direction. Willow was caught between two painful realizations, her mother's painful confession and the reality that Drew had concealed something so significant from her. The feeling of being caught in an impossible situation, unable to escape from the emotional weight of it all, was crushing. She had always believed that if she held on to Drew, their relationship could be built on trust and love. Now, faced with the possibility that Drew had been dishonest, Willow had to confront the fact that her own idealistic view of their relationship might have been built on false pretenses. Though the truth was staring her in the face, Willow couldn't help but feel trapped. The idea of accepting the reality of Nina and Drew's past was like opening a door she wasn't ready to walk through. She had tried so hard to keep her world together, to hold on to the relationship she had with Drew, but the truth made everything feel fragile, like it could all fall apart at any moment. No matter how much she tried to deny it, the mounting evidence forced her to admit that the story her mother had shared wasn't a fabrication. It was part of a complicated reality she could no longer ignore. With each passing moment, Willow was forced to accept that her relationship with Drew was now tied to a past she had no control over. It wasn't easy, and it certainly wasn't fair, but the truth was something she could no longer avoid. The more she allowed herself to acknowledge the facts, the more she felt like her own foundation was shaking. She wasn't just dealing with the betrayal of her mother, but now she had to confront the possibility that Drew was someone she had never truly known. The complexities of their relationships, entangled in lies and secrets, left Willow standing at a crossroads, uncertain of where she would go from here. As Willow slowly came to terms with the fact that Nina was telling the truth, she couldn't help but feel overwhelming disappointment. Nina's confessions not only altered the way Willow viewed Drew, but they also shattered the trust she had carefully built in both her relationship with her mother and with Drew. The realization that both of them had deceived her in such different ways was a bitter pill to swallow. The love and faith she had placed in both of them now seemed tainted, and Willow felt like everything she thought she knew had been ripped away. Coming to terms with this truth was far from easy. Willow found herself in a whirlwind of emotions: betrayal, confusion, anger, each one more intense than the last. It was one thing to feel deceived by her mother, someone she had grown up with and who had always been there for her, but to realize that Drew, The man she had been falling for, had been hiding such a crucial part of his past from her, was a devastating blow. What made it even harder was the understanding that Nina's mistake in her romantic choices wasn't just something that affected her own life, it had hurt Willow deeply. The betrayal ran much deeper than she had anticipated. As she grappled with these feelings, Willow was also forced to face a difficult truth about life itself. No one, not even Drew, was perfect. She had always idealized Drew, seeing him as the perfect partner, the one who could provide her with the love and stability she had been searching for. But now, the reality was that Drew had his own flaws, his own mistakes, just like everyone else. The truth, no matter how painful, was an inevitable part of life. And Willow had to accept that sometimes the things she loved most could be shattered by the very imperfections she had overlooked. Willow's struggle was not just with Drew and Nina, but with herself. She had to reconcile the person she thought she knew with the truth that was unfolding before her. The process of letting go of her idealized versions of both Drew and Nina was incredibly difficult, as it meant confronting the raw, painful truth that people she loved and trusted were not who she believed them to be. The weight of these revelations left her questioning her own judgment and what it meant for her future. Through all of this turmoil, Willow's internal conflict continued to grow. While she tried to move forward, the anger and hurt from the betrayals lingered, and she couldn't help but feel the deep, painful loss of the innocence she once had in her relationships with both Drew and Nina. In time, Willow would have to come to terms with the fact that sometimes life's harshest truths were the ones that helped people grow, even though it was a painful process. It was also an inevitable part of moving forward, facing the reality of imperfection and accepting that sometimes people are simply not who we want them to be. As Willow struggled with the truth, her relationship with Nina continued to deteriorate, and the tension between them grew ever more unbearable. What started as a moment of shock and disbelief quickly evolved into a full-scale battle. Willow, still reeling from the betrayal, refused to let go of her anger, and Nina, feeling misunderstood and isolated, found herself fighting for her daughter's trust. The next few days saw Willow retreating further into herself, pushing everyone, including Nina, away. She couldn't bear the thought of seeing her mother or Drew, both of whom had betrayed her in ways she couldn't easily forgive. She found herself questioning everything, her trust in Drew, her relationship with Nina, and even her own judgment. As Willow withdrew into isolation, Nina became desperate. She knew that to salvage any hope of reconnecting with her daughter, she had to act fast. Meanwhile, Drew, caught in the crossfire, found himself in a difficult position. His feelings for Willow were undeniable, but the reality of his past with Nina weighed heavily on him. Drew realized that the longer he stayed silent, the more he risked losing Willow forever. Yet, he also understood that his past with Nina was something he couldn't erase, and that acknowledging it fully might make everything even worse. The battle was not just about the truth, it was about the fragile connections between all three of them and how they could rebuild what had been broken. Nina, now desperate to prove herself to Willow, decided to take matters into her own hands. She knew she had to show Willow that she was being honest and that her actions, no matter how misguided, were not intended to hurt her. It was a delicate balancing act. She needed to give Willow space to process her emotions, but also show that she was committed to making amends. Nina hoped that if she could just get through to Willow, she might eventually be able to repair the bond they had shared. However, Willow's hurt and mistrust ran deep. Every time Nina tried to reach out, her efforts were met with coldness or anger. Willow couldn't bring herself to forgive Nina, and the more she heard Nina's attempts at explanations, the more she felt that there was a deeper betrayal at play. To Willow, it wasn't just about the affair. It was about the way everything had been kept secret from her. The lies that were hidden beneath the surface. Nina's motives felt unclear, and that was the hardest thing for Willow to overcome. The battle between Nina and Willow was no longer just about the past, it was about their future, their ability to rebuild trust, and the scars that would remain no matter what. As the days wore on, Both women began to realize that moving forward wouldn't be easy. They would have to face their pain, their anger, and their fears if they wanted any chance of reconciliation. But the road ahead seemed daunting, and neither Nina nor Willow knew how, or even if they could ever truly forgive each other. With Drew caught in the middle, the conflict between Nina and Willow became even more complicated. He wanted to support Willow, but he also couldn't deny his own history with Nina. He knew that if he didn't find a way to navigate his own feelings, he risked losing both women. The tangled web of emotions and secrets only grew more intense, and the stakes were higher than ever. Would Nina and Willow be able to put their differences aside, or would this betrayal tear them apart for good? Only time would tell, but one thing was certain. The battle for trust and love was far from over.